You're standing on a beach in Hawaii. Warm breeze on your face, toes in the sand, a volcano smoldering in the distance. But this fairy tale won't last long as the whole island is sinking into the ocean, 40 times faster than the scientists previously expected. Some parts of the island could be underwater by 2050. Uh-oh. To understand why it's all happening, we have to go way back in time, millions of years ago, to see where it all started, deep under the Pacific Ocean. Now, unlike most volcanoes, which usually form along the edges of tectonic plates, the Hawaiian Islands popped into existence smack in the middle of one. That's because of something geologists call a hotspot. The Earth's mantle is like a giant pot of thick, bubbling stew. In a few places, heat builds up so intensely that molten rock, magma, punches straight through the Earth's crust. It's like turning up the heat under one part of a stew pot until it boils over. That upwelling of magma is the hotspot. As magma reaches the surface, it erupts as lava. When the lava cools and hardens, it forms land. When enough of it piles up over the thousands or even millions of years, an island forms. The hotspot doesn't move and stays rooted deep in the mantle. But the Pacific Plate, the giant chunk of Earth's crust that Hawaii rides on, is always slowly drifting to the northwest. So, every few million years, a new volcano forms over the hotspot and the old one gets carried away. Thanks to all this, a chain of islands formed, each one a little older and more worn down than the last. If you look at a map, you can trace this volcanic breadcrumb trail across the Pacific. It stretches all the way from the Big Island in the southeast, which is the youngest, up through Maui, Oahu, and Kauai, and into the sea as a chain of underwater mountains called the Emperor Seamounts. The Big Island is still growing today, thanks to active volcanoes like Kīlauea and Mauna Loa. The older islands, like Kauai, are eroding, shrinking, and, sadly, sinking. Oahu is going in the water at the speed of nearly 1/40th of an inch every year. That's about as thick as 10 sheets of printer paper. But certain coastal regions are sinking at 1 inch per year, and that's no joke. This is happening for a few reasons. First, as the islands move away from the hotspot, they cool down. That might sound good in summer, but cooler rock actually shrinks and becomes denser, making the whole island sit lower in the water. Erosion gradually makes the island smaller, and unless there is further volcanic activity or a drop in sea level, the island submerges below the ocean surface at some point. Second, there's the weight of the islands themselves. They're made of solid rock and lava, thousands of cubic miles of it. Over time, their own mass slowly pushes them downward into the soft underlying mantle. And third, there's human activity. The first people who settled here were Polynesian navigators around 1,000 to 1,200 years ago. These navigators used stars, waves, and bird flight patterns to guide them and reach the Hawaiian Islands after weeks at sea. By the time European explorers arrived in the late 18th century, Hawaiians had developed a rich society with chiefs, priests, artisans, farmers, and navigators. The islands were divided into districts, each managed by local leaders, and people lived in harmony with the land. And then it was time of Kamehameha the Great. He unified all the Hawaiian Islands under a single rule for the first time in 1810. The islands were developing in the following centuries, and people needed more flat land near the coast. They started piling in dirt, rocks, and rubble to cover up soggy ground and create new land where there wasn't any before. It worked for a while, and that's how they built roads, neighborhoods, and even airports at some point. But that ground is soft and squishy underneath, and now those areas are sinking much faster than the rest of the island. A new study says that in some parts of Hawaii, this combination of factors could boost the risk of flooding by over 50% by the year 2050. It could force communities to prepare for future floods 50 years sooner than they originally thought. By 2080, flooding is expected to hit Waikiki, downtown Honolulu, and even the local international airport much more often. That could cause some serious problems for everyday life. Hawaii's tourism, beachfront buildings, and natural ecosystems could all be in complete chaos. Over $12.9 billion worth of infrastructure on Oahu alone is in danger from flooding and related damage. That's roads, hotels, homes, and way more. The scientists behind the study are hoping their work can actually help. They want local leaders to use this new data to make smart decisions that reduce future damage and keep people safe. It could help them figure out how bad flooding might get, how strong the buildings and roads need to be, and how to design communities that can survive big changes. Now, Hawaii isn't the only place in the world that's sinking because of its own weight. The weight of all the buildings in New York City is literally pressing it down into the earth. That's more than 1.68 trillion pounds of skyscrapers, apartments, towers, and bridges. That's enough pressure to make the land beneath the city sink by up to 0.08 of an inch per year. Now that may not sound like much, but it adds up quickly, and in some spots, the sinking is happening even faster. Scientists call this slow downward shift subsidence. To figure all this out, researchers use satellite data to look at just how heavy the city is and how fast the ground is moving. Turns out, it's not just the buildings sitting on solid rock. Some parts of the city were built on squishy stuff like old wetlands, soft sediments, or human-made fill, the same as in Hawaii. But even areas built on sturdier ground aren't safe. The study found that layers rich with clay deep underground can keep compressing slowly over time under the weight of heavy buildings. This process is called secondary settlement and can keep happening for decades or even centuries. So even if it looks like everything's fine on the surface, the ground could still be giving way underneath. The scientists behind the research say this isn't just a New York problem. Cities around the world are expanding fast, and most of that growth is happening along coastlines. Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, is one of the fastest sinking cities in the world, and it has around 10.5 million people living there and about 30 million in the greater metro area. Experts say that by 2030, some parts of the city could be flooded so often or so badly that all these people just won't be able to live there anymore. Jakarta was built on swampy land. It's right next to the Java Sea and has 13 rivers running through it, so flooding has always been a part of life there, but it's gotten worse lately. Scientists say that by 2050, about 95% of North Jakarta could be underwater, and it's already happening. In the last 10 years, North Jakarta sank by over 8 feet, and in some places, it's still sinking up to 10 inches every year. That's more than double what other big coastal cities are experiencing. On average, Jakarta sinks between 1/3 of an inch to 6 inches each year, and now nearly half of the city is already sitting below sea level. So Indonesia found an original solution to this problem and decided to build a brand new city in the jungle to replace Jakarta. They plan to grow Nusantara, the new capital, into a modern, green, and high-tech city in the next 20 years. City planners are calling Nusantara a sponge city, as it should be able to absorb rainwater into the ground like a sponge, instead of letting it flood the streets. That way, even with heavy rain, Nusantara won't flood the way Jakarta has.
People living in Hawaii need to make at least twice the average salary in the rest of the US to live comfortably. Those who aren't ready to pay $5 for a gallon of milk have to look for happiness elsewhere. And year after year, the state makes it to the top lines of the population loss rating. While the local middle class is leaving, Hawaii is turning into a heaven for billionaires. Just 37 of them already own 11% of all the private land in the Aloha State. Larry Ellison, co-founder of the Oracle Corporation, bought 98% of the island of Lanai, including the grocery store, the only gas station, and the community newspaper, all for a nifty sum of $300 million. This makes him the boss and landlord of everyone on the island. Mark Zuckerberg, the Meta founder and CEO, is building a huge compound on Kauai with more than a dozen buildings, at least 30 bedrooms and bathrooms, a tunnel leading to a 5,000 square feet underground bunker, and 11 tree houses connected by intricate rope bridges. The local residents with ancestral rights to this land lost in court and had to put it up for auction. The Malaysian tycoon Kvek Leng Khan owns a third of the island of Molokai through his business empire. Of course, these and some of the world's richest people create new jobs and invest in development projects on the islands. But still, nearly 2/3 of the locals believe that their state is being run for tourists at the expense of the residents. A lot of famous people like to live in Wailea and Makina in Maui because it's peaceful and gives them the privacy they want. Oprah Winfrey has a big house up in the local hills. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, reportedly bought a huge house by La Perouse Bay for $78 million. Other famous people who live in Maui include Clint Eastwood, Mick Fleetwood, Jim Carrey, and Alice Cooper. When you visit Maui, you can see a special Hall of Fame display at the airport showing those celebrities. It's supposed to celebrate their ties with the island, but the local people feel like it only highlights the huge gap between the new super wealthy residents and the local people who can barely afford to live there. As the rich and famous keep buying property across Hawaii, home prices continue to rise. It's more expensive to buy a house here than in Washington, D.C. or California. Part of the reason for such high pricing is how the land itself is formed. Hawaii is bigger than most people think, but it's made up of lots of separate islands that are spread far apart. Even though the islands are big, not all of the land can be used to build houses or neighborhoods. Unlike most of the U.S., which has a lot of flat land and gentle hills, much of Hawaii is made up of steep, rocky mountains and rough terrain. This kind of land is very hard to build on or live on. Because of this, most of the people on Hawaii, about 1 million of them, live on the island called Oahu. The other islands, like the Big Island, have far fewer people. There isn't enough land for everyone, and that makes it hard for people who have lived in Hawaii their whole lives to afford a place to live. Tourism makes up 21% of the state's economy. Most of the visitors come from the United States and Japan. Tourists bring in tons of money, but there's a problem. Depending too much on tourism can be risky for Hawaii. In the recent years, because of we all know what happened, a health rule called the Conditional Sail Order stopped cruise ships from coming to Hawaii for health safety reasons. Many other tourist activities, like visiting beaches or attending events, were also shut down. With fewer visitors, Hawaii earned a lot less money, which hurt the economy. To avoid this problem in the future, Hawaii has been trying to make money in other ways besides tourism. One idea is to invest more in fishing, but this hasn't been easy. At some point, there was too much fishing going on here, and now Hawaii has to bring in 63% of its seafood from other places instead of catching it nearby. There are farms here that grow pineapples, macadamia nuts, coffee, and produce milk. But now, farming isn't as important as it was 100 years ago. Probably one of the reasons is that it's more profitable to sell the land for houses or hotels than to use it for farming. This change made Hawaii even more dependent on tourism and made living in the Aloha State so very pricey. Honolulu is reported to be the 7th most expensive city to live in the U.S. A family of 4 spends around $8,000 a month here, and a single adult will have to pay, on average, $2,500. Food alone costs around $500 a person for 1 month. Most of the food in Hawaii, about 85 to 90%, comes from faraway places. Since it has to travel more than 2,500 miles to get there, around 1/3 of all the food spoils along the way, especially because Hawaii is warm and humid. This waste makes things more expensive because stores know they'll lose some of their products and charge more to cover their losses. There aren't as many stores competing with each other. If stores don't compete, they have no reason to lower their prices. On top of that, they have to pay a lot for things like rent and electricity, so they raise their prices to make up for those costs. Speaking of electricity, an average bill is around $200, which is almost 90% higher than the national average. Yep, the Aloha State has the highest energy costs in the country. And perhaps that's why people in Hawaii use the least amount of electricity compared to other states. But their bills are still much higher. The main reason is the price per unit of electricity, called a kilowatt hour. 1 unit of electricity costs almost 40 cents. To compare, Utah has the cheapest rate at just 10.91 cents. It's so expensive in Hawaii because most of the electricity comes from oil, and that oil has to be shipped to the islands. Since Hawaii depends so much on oil, energy costs go up and down with oil prices. On top of all that, the income tax is some of the highest in the country. A quarter of all households in Hawaii spent more than their income in 2024. To survive, people used savings and credit cards and cut expenses. They also had to work more hours or get an extra job. They were forced to sell their belongings and borrow money from relatives, banks, or other lenders. Almost half of residents are in the category called ALICE, and it has nothing to do with Alice in Wonderland. It means asset-limited, income-constrained, employed. More than 1 in 3 residents lives below the ALICE annual income threshold. And then there's also legislation that further complicates things for Hawaii. It says that any goods shipped between places in the U.S. must be carried on ships that are owned, built, and run by Americans. This makes shipping much more expensive because U.S. ships and crews cost a lot more than ships from other countries. Most of the world's ships don't follow these rules because they're registered in countries like Panama. Because of this, Hawaii can still get goods from places like East Asia using cheaper ships, but if they want something from the mainland US, it costs way more money. In fact, this law costs Hawaii over $1 billion every year. This law also makes it really hard for Hawaii to grow businesses because everything is so expensive. The cost of insurance is also going up. This is because the islands are hit by natural disasters like hurricanes and storms more often now. All of this adds up to making life in Hawaii even more expensive. But even despite all that, the state steadily lands high in studies on well-being. Even people who can barely afford a living are mostly happier, or at least less unhappy in Hawaii than in other states. I guess the strong community support, a clean and fantastically beautiful environment, and the ability to have beach parties all year round make up for many hardships. You're chilling in Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. A friend calls you up. Hey, I'm here too. Meet me in Maui. Great, but how do you get there? Your first thought is probably to take a ferry, but that's impossible. Hawaii is a pretty unique place. It's the most expensive state to live in. It has its own official language besides English. And it's the only American state made up entirely of islands. Hawaii has a total of 137 islands. 8 are the main ones, but only 6 are open to tourists. And the distance between those islands is probably bigger than you'd expect. For example, traveling from Oahu to the Big Island is around 185 miles, which is about the same distance as Chicago to Indianapolis. You might be surprised that you can't make that trip by boat. In fact, the only ferry system that actually takes passengers in Hawaii runs between Maui and Lanai. That's it. So your only option is to travel between islands is by plane. Honestly, it's a little surprising, especially considering how many people visit Hawaii every year. Tourism pretty much drives their economy, and in the first 8 months of 2024 alone, over 6 million people visited its beautiful beaches. Knowing that, we would expect Hawaii to set up a good ferry system to make it easier for visitors to get around. Just like in Greece. This would probably boost tourism even more, bringing more money to the state. But believe me, authorities and private companies also know that. In fact, they've already tried it. Ferries were a big way of getting around in Hawaii from the 19th century up until the 1950s. Since then, there have been a few attempts to bring back a ferry service, but unfortunately, they have all failed. One of the biggest attempts was the Hawaii Super Ferry, which aimed to provide a fast, affordable boat service between islands. It could carry almost 900 passengers and even allow them to bring their own cars along. The trial run started in 2007, and people were excited, but it turned into a big fiasco. A bunch of legal and environmental issues came up, like concerns about the impact on marine life, especially whales. The courts decided the ferry didn't go through the proper environmental reviews, and that caused a lot of trouble. By 2009, after tons of protests and setbacks, they had to shut it down. If a project like this comes up again, it will probably fail one more time. And there are a few reasons why it's almost impossible to set up a regular ferry system there. Let's start by talking about Hawaii's rough waters. They are deep and wild. Take the Alenoiaha Channel, for example. It's a 30-mile stretch that separates Maui from the Big Island. Its name means Great Billow Smashing Channel, and it lives up to that. It's over 6,000 feet deep, making it one of the most dangerous stretches of water on Earth. The wind there is also super strong, the fastest in Hawaii's coastal waters. But it's not any easier in the rest of the archipelago. The whole region gets hit by storms from the Pacific up north, sending big waves crashing into the islands and making the waters rough and unpredictable. Swells can come from 3, 4, or even more directions, making the sea feel really choppy. Someone who's not used to taking ferry boats would definitely find that, well, uncomfortable, to say the least. To deal with rough seas like this, the ferries have to be really big and strong. But that also makes them more expensive and harder to run than the ones in places like Alaska or Washington State. Another reason it's so tough to set up this system today has to do with marine life. A big ship moving through the shallower waters when docking could really damage the local ecosystem. And there's also the problem that the sea routes are also the migration paths of many sea animals, like humpback whales and spinner dolphins. Not to mention, ferry services can make it easier to spread harmful plants and animals, what experts call invasive species. See, Hawaii's ecosystem is super unique because it's been isolated out in the middle of the Pacific. When we talk about plants and animals that are native to Hawaii, we mean they got there on their own, no humans involved. They arrived with the help of waves, wind, or even birds flying over. But events like these are super rare, so for over 70 million years, their plants and animals didn't have to deal with outside competition. That's made them really fragile. So, when new species get brought in by us, it can be a big problem, and they could end up harming the environment. Hawaii's already been battling invasive species like fire ants, coqui frogs, and meconium, a fast-growing plant from South America that takes over native forests. People there worry that ferries, which carry cars and cargo between islands, could accidentally spread these invaders even more. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the video, the long distances between their lands don't really help either. For example, if you were to travel from Oahu to the Big Island of Hawaii by boat, it would take around 30 hours, and that's without any stops. The same trip by plane takes about 50 minutes. Ferries that cover long distances are much more expensive, so they need a much bigger demand to make them profitable. On top of that, the state doesn't really have the infrastructure, like enough ports and terminals to support the operations. So setting up new routes is pretty much out of the question. Airplanes, on the other hand, are a different story. The air travel industry in Hawaii is already well established and super competitive. That means flying is still the most practical option in Hawaii. Planes are quick, they don't make you seasick, and are pretty affordable, usually costing around $100 for a round trip. Okay, but what do the locals think about all this? Well, apparently, there isn't a huge demand for residents to commute between the islands all that often. Oahu is the busiest island in Hawaii, with about 70% of the state's population living there. It is where Honolulu, the capital, is located, and where most of the state's business happens. So, people from the other islands usually come over for a specific doctor's appointment or to catch a big concert. And that might happen once or twice a year, no more than that. So, even if people could choose between taking a ferry and a plane for these special occasions, most of them would probably still prefer flying. There are plenty of options between the main island airports. Planes usually start flying around 5 in the morning, and there are flights available every hour until the last one, which is usually at 9 in the evening. If you've been dreaming of going to this paradisiacal place but are worried about spending too much on plane tickets, I have some tips for you. First off, keep in mind that visiting all the main islands in 5 days or less is way too ambitious. So, if you don't have much time to spend there, think about your priorities. Each of the 6 islands open to tourists has its own vibe and activities. But you don't need to visit them all in one trip, and you can save some money by sticking to fewer islands. You can still explore the diversity of the islands by picking 2 that offer a nice contrast to each other. For example, while Oahu has that bustling city energy, Kauai has a much more relaxed vibe. Also, flights in the morning are usually cheaper, and it might be better to fly on a weekday rather than the weekend, although the price difference isn't usually huge. Hopefully these tips will save you some cash while still having an unforgettable island hopping adventure in Hawaii. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who's also dreaming of exploring these amazing islands.
Is the Big Apple getting a little too heavy for its own good? A recent study revealed that New York City is sinking. And get this, it's all because of those towering skyscrapers. Apparently, the whole event is called subsidence, which is when the Earth's surface settles bit by bit, or suddenly sinks. Soft sediments shifting and the weight of the city itself are the culprits behind this sinking sensation. Now, don't get too alarmed. The study found that New York is sinking at a rate of 0.04 to 0.07 inches per year. Sure, that doesn't sound like much, but there are parts of the city that are sinking even faster than that. This sinking situation could cause some trouble for the city, especially since it's already pretty low-lying and home to over 8 million people. So it's important that local authorities come up with some strategies to tackle the growing flood risk and rising sea levels. Although, I'm not sure building giant seawalls is the way to go. We might need to get a little more creative than that. Geologists want to make sure we're all aware that building more high-rises near the coast, rivers, or lakes could contribute to future flood risks. So we really need to think twice before we start constructing skyscrapers left and right. In recent studies, scientists calculated the total mass of all the buildings in New York City, over 1 million of them, and it adds up to a whopping 1.68 trillion pounds. Talk about a heavy load. Now, they didn't include the weight of the roads, sidewalks, bridges, and other paved areas, so you can only imagine how much more weight is added to the city. But hey, even with these limitations, the researchers did a pretty good job of accounting for the complex geology beneath New York, including the sand, silt, clay deposits, and good old bedrock. They found out that certain types of soil, like clay and artificial fill, are more prone to subsidence. On the other hand, bedrock stays pretty firm and keeps those skyscrapers in place. So at least we don't have to worry about the Empire State Building taking a dive anytime soon. Comparing their fancy models with satellite data, the researchers created a map of the city showing where the sinking is happening. And guess what? The increased urbanization and all that groundwater pumping and draining are only making things worse. It's high time we start protecting our resources, don't you think? I wouldn't start packing my bags just yet. New York isn't the only sinking city out there, you know. Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, is facing some serious sinking action too. In fact, parts of it could be underwater by 2050. That's like a real-life Atlantis situation. Over 30 million people in Jakarta are now deciding if they should relocate the entire city. If there's a city out there we should worry about sinking, that's Venice for sure. But why is it so eager to take a dive, you might ask? Well, let me tell you the complex truth. You see, Venice decided to set up shop on a marshy lagoon with shoddy foundations. As time went by, the ground underneath just couldn't hold it together and started compacting like a squished marshmallow. On top of that, the city's been slurping up groundwater like it's going out of style or something. The cherry on top of this mushy cake is that the sea levels have also been slowly rising. And guess what? Those sneaky plate tectonics are having a laugh by shoving the Adriatic plate under the Apennine Mountains, giving Venice an extra push downward. Someone had the bright idea to stop pumping groundwater, thinking they could stop the sinking shenanigans. But hold your gondolas. A new study revealed that the sinking hasn't completely stopped, just slowed down a bit. It turns out the whole area is tilting ever so slightly to the east, with Venice perched on the slightly higher end. You must be wondering how much Venice sinks in a year, right? Brace yourself for this shocking revelation. It's sinking at a rate of about 0.04 to 0.07 inches a year, similar to New York. At this pace, in the next 20 years, it could sink a whopping 3 inches below sea level. To avoid turning into a Venetian fishbowl, locals are frantically building special barriers to keep the water from crashing into the lagoon. But don't hold your breath, because this project has had more delays than you'd expect. Oh, and have you noticed that charming old-style vibe in Venice? It's not just because they're fans of the vintage look. Those salty waters have been wreaking havoc on the buildings, thanks to the water levels constantly breaching the original damp-proofing. Now the water's cozying up to the masonry, and the ground floors of many apartments are no longer safe enough to live in. Now, when will Venice take a dive into the abyss? It's hard to say for sure. Subsidence and rising sea levels are as slow and unpredictable as a turtle in a marathon. But experts have playfully warned that if things continue as they are, Venice could be doing the backstroke beneath the waves by 2100. Fear not, though. They're doing their best to protect this floating gem of history and culture from becoming a Hollywood disaster flick. So don't cancel that Venice day trip just yet. New Orleans has a peculiar watery situation going on too. You see, this lively place was initially built just a smidge above sea level, and now it's gradually sinking. Back in the day, when an area of the city called the French Quarter was just popping up, folks had to make do with what they had. They scored the best land they could find, but it was only about 10 feet above sea level. And let's not forget, the rest of the city is as flat as a pancake, with the areas around the French Quarter being just a hair lower. Now, even though they knew they were up against some soggy odds, the resourceful New Orleans residents did their best to elevate their houses above the flood-prone land they chose as their home. There's more. The ground beneath New Orleans is as wobbly as a plate of Jell-O. Architects had to keep things short and sweet because they feared the soil couldn't handle the weight of taller structures. They played it safe, sticking to 2 or 2.5 stories. Here's where it gets interesting. The city installed a fancy drainage system in the 1900s, thinking it would solve their water woes. And while it did help with the marshes and all, it inadvertently sucked the life out of the soil. Yep, the ground was left high and dry, without enough sediment and water to keep it steady. As a result, those former marshes sank as if they were in a quicksand competition. By the 1930s, things got even more topsy-turvy. 1/3 of the city was below sea level, and by the time Hurricane Katrina made its grand entrance, that number skyrocketed to around 50%. Oh, and here's the icing on the cake. Sea levels decided to join the party, rising faster than a helium balloon. So now, not only is New Orleans sinking, but the surrounding area is also at various degrees below sea level. So, what can we do about all these sinking cities? Well, for instance, we could manage our water consumption a bit better. We can't just keep sucking groundwater out of the earth like there's no tomorrow. We've got to find new ways to quench our urban centers' thirst. Think about it. We could purify surface waters, or even turn salty seawater into a sweet solution. Of course, we'll need a boatload of energy to make it all work. Speaking of great urban water management, let me tell you about a town in Denmark called Nye. These guys have got it all figured out. They collect rainwater and use it to supply their toilets and washing machines. Talk about resourcefulness. Now that's what I call a splash of genius.
Now, if you're in an airplane soaring through the air, you may think it's the heaviest object in the sky. But those large cumulus clouds you see shaped like your dog can weigh more than 1 million pounds. Clouds are just tiny drops of water gathered up together. Don't worry, they won't come crashing down in pieces. It may seem like there are infinite stars in the Milky Way galaxy, but NASA experts are convinced that there are potentially 100 to 400 billion stars out there. There are around 3 trillion trees in the world and about 400,000 plant species. Out of all those plants, between 80,000 and 300,000 are edible, but only about 200 of those plants land in different cuisines. If you're standing in Alaska, you can expect Hawaii to inch its way to you ever so slowly. You might not feel it, but tectonic plates are always moving at the same rate as your fingernails are growing. Hawaii moves 3 inches every year because the Pacific plate is always pushing northward. Bees buzz around with 4 wings instead of 2. The 2 wings you usually see become a single wing when they fly, but when they land and chill around, they unhook back to 4 wings. They even have an invisible chain network where they fly through to go from flower to flower. Bees can fly higher than Mount Everest, which is almost 30,000 feet high. Hurricanes can't rush across the equator because of something called the Coriolis effect, which is also responsible for many megastorms. Low pressures in the northern hemisphere rotate counterclockwise. In the southern hemisphere, it goes clockwise. So, if a hurricane swings by the equator, it won't be able to rotate. The acid inside your stomach's so strong, it can melt stainless steel. The acid inside is rocking a pH of 2 to 3 and doesn't melt your insides thanks to a stomach lining which secretes a chemical to balance it out. Your body replaces this lining every 4 days or so. Owls have something like eye tubes instead of eyeballs. Humans can turn their heads at a 180-degree angle and can rotate their eyes in multiple directions. Owls don't move their eyes freely like us, but they make up for it by turning their heads 270 degrees. They can see really well at night. Okay, chameleon, we get it. You can move your eyes independently in all directions. Please stop staring at me. If you happen to be in outer space on a planet in our solar system, then chances are you're swimming in diamonds. The atmospheres of planets like Jupiter and Saturn have high pressures that can crystallize carbon atoms and create diamonds. Scientists even claim that all that icy bling rains as much as 2 million pounds yearly in Saturn. The sun will keep getting brighter and hotter and eventually evaporate oceans, making life on Earth like an oven, similar to Venus. Our Milky Way is on its course to a collision with the Andromeda Galaxy. Stars, asteroids, planets, and moons will smash right into each other and destroy everything. Of course, something like this doesn't happen overnight, but eventually the 2 galaxies will combine into a single mega cluster galaxy. This won't happen for billions of years, though. I won't be around then. Slow lorises with their bugged eyes may be cute, but they're the only venomous primates in the animal kingdom. They get venom from a gland under their armpit before biting a predator. Unfortunately, their numbers are dwindling in the wild. Forests and jungles aren't the only ones responsible for producing the majority of the oxygen you breathe. It's the microscopic creatures called photoplankton that live in the upper layers of water, specifically the oceans. Like plants, they also use photosynthesis to turn sunlight into oxygen. There are so many of them that they contribute 50 to 85% of all the oxygen. Pluto was discovered in 1930, and until now hasn't even made a full rotation around the Sun. It takes Pluto 248 years to make a full orbit, which means Pluto will celebrate with fireworks and countdowns in the year 2178. There have been instances where snow was covering the sandy landscapes of the Sahara Desert, and it isn't even the largest desert on Earth. The winner in that category goes to the Antarctic polar desert. Instead of sand, it's made of frozen water. Even the Sahara receives more rainfall than the Antarctic desert. In 1933, the double eagle was a coin valued at $20. Only a few of these were released, but the trend never picked up, and so the coin was reclaimed. Some were kept, but most were destroyed. In 2002, someone bought one of these coins at an auction for $7.5 million, making it the most expensive coin ever sold at an auction. Kangaroos have a spring-like action on their legs, which makes them hop around. But it's impossible for them to do so without their tails, that act as a counterweight. These hoppers can bounce at a speed of around 15 miles per hour, and kangaroos can't hop backwards. Your favorite summer snack was invented by accident by an 11-year-old boy in 1905. Frank Epperson accidentally left soda powder and water with a wooden stick overnight and got frozen stiff. He called it the Ep cycle at first, but popsicle stuck around, and now they come in many awesome flavors. The biggest animal on Earth weighs as much as 33 elephants. Its tongue alone can be as heavy as one of those elephants. A blue whale's heart can weigh as much as a small car and needs to beat every 10 seconds. 3 big blue whales stacked head to fin are about the length of the Statue of Liberty. A human can even swim through their large veins with ease. The nano-chameleon is the tiniest reptile to be discovered. In January 2021, scientists went on an expedition in northern Madagascar rainforests and found this little critter. It feeds on mites and other microscopic creatures and is a little more than half an inch long. Europa is one of Jupiter's many moons and is the closest thing scientists call our next potential home within our solar system. The surface is covered in ice, but it's believed there's an ocean underneath that could be teeming with microscopic living beings. If you're afraid of the dark, then the moon is probably no place for you. Shadows are darker on the moon than on Earth. On our blue planet, the atmosphere is able to scatter more sunlight, unlike on the moon. The people of ancient Greece and Rome used sticky spider webs as natural bandages for patients. The webbings have built-in natural chemicals that help with healing. Spider webs are so strong that 2 inches of wrapped spiderweb material can stop a plane when at landing speed. A study shows that tree shrews have a mutation in their system that makes them less sensitive to spices. They're the only known mammal, other than humans, to enjoy the flavors of mouth-burning chili foods. They did an experiment with a bunch of other mammals and found out that while the mammals avoided the spicy food, the tree shrews gobbled it down without thinking. Dolphins are one of the smartest creatures in the world, partly because they can sleep while being awake. When sleeping in the wild, their brains have to be partially on guard for any predators lurking in the water. When the heat rises in a fire, the air around it rushes to replace it, causing a spinning column to form. And that's how fire tornadoes or fire whirls are born. Octopuses may be rare to spot since they camouflage themselves so well, but they can lay more than 55,000 eggs. The mother will spend the next 6 months taking care of them, and once they hatch, they can be the size of a single rice grain. Next time you're cuddling with your cat, check out their back paws and count how many toes they have. There are 5 toes on each of their forepaws, but only 4 on their hindpaws. Scientists believe it helps them run faster or escape after plotting against you. Chow chows and some other dog breeds have bluish-purple tongues. Giraffes also have tongues of a similar color, except theirs are around 20 inches long. They use them for grabbing leaves from high branches. Next time you visit the Eiffel Tower, take a picture in the summer and the winter. If you have super bionic eyesight, then you'll notice that in the summer, the higher temperatures can make the tower grow by 6 inches. Hey, any view of the Eiffel is an eyeful. I'm sure you've seen it, or caught a glimpse of some videos of ships sailing through a weird line of water. In those images, one side is dark blue and clear, and the other side is greenish and silty looking. Some have claimed the footage shows the boundaries between oceans, and that water defies all its own laws by not mixing. Well, it turns out that's not exactly true. Our planet is over 70% covered by water, and out of all of that H2O, two of the biggest bodies are the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. These massive stretches of salty goodness are home to some of the world's most fascinating creatures, from the tiniest plankton to the largest whales. While we may have given these oceans separate names, they are constantly mixing and mingling with each other, regardless of how we choose to draw our maps. It's like a never-ending dance party, with water currents doing the cha-cha between the Pacific and Atlantic. So don't be fooled by those imaginary borders we've drawn on our maps. These oceans are always in motion and connected in more ways than we can imagine. Now, the Pacific Ocean takes the cake for being the largest and deepest ocean on the planet. It's actually deeper than the Grand Canyon. Meanwhile, the Atlantic Ocean comes in second. A red ribbon. But size isn't everything, right? Each of these oceans has its own unique set of characteristics. For example, did you know that the salinity of the Atlantic, that's the salt content, is higher than that of the Pacific or Indian Oceans? Or that the waters of the Red Sea and the Mediterranean are even saltier still? It's because of the lower salinity waters from the deep sea can't easily flow in, and water evaporates faster than rainfall can replace it. It's like the ocean has its own seasoning preferences. Hey, who knew? Now, let's talk about a little place called Cape Horn. If you look at it on a map, you'll have to scroll way down through South America. It's also where the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans come together to play. Here we can also find a powerful current that transports water from west to east, displacing volumes from the Pacific into the Atlantic. But let me tell you, traveling around Cape Horn is no joke. It's a turbulent and dangerous voyage, and many brave sailors have been lost attempting it. And finally, let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say the two-toned ocean. You know the one I'm talking about, where two differently colored types of water seem to be existing alongside each other? Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's not where the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans collide. It's just fresh water that's filled with sediment coming across some dark, salty water from the ocean. What the video captures is most likely taken from somewhere in the Gulf of Alaska. Speaking of color palettes, have you ever wondered why the ocean comes in a variety of shades of blue? Well, get ready for a fun science lesson. First things first, let's get one thing clear. The water that covers our entire planet is not really blue, it's clear. It's the depth and what's in and below the water that influences its color. It appears blue if the water is deep enough that light isn't reflected off the bottom. This is due to the fact that sunlight can be absorbed or reflected by water molecules as it enters the ocean. The shorter wavelengths of light are more likely to scatter, giving the ocean its blue color, whereas the longer wavelengths are absorbed close to the surface if there is nothing in the water but, water. But that's not all. The ocean's bottom and its particles can also affect the color. For example, in some areas of Greece, the water comes in a gorgeous turquoise shade. This happens due to the seafloor being filled with white sand or rocks. It turns a lovely light blue tint when the light reflects back up from the bottom. The health of the ocean can also be seen in its color. Rarely is the water clear, and it frequently contains suspended particles, contaminants, tiny organisms, and small plant and animal life. Like a doctor reading a patient's vital signs, oceanographers examine the color of the ocean to determine its health. Now, let's talk about phytoplankton, the tiny plants that give the ocean its green tint. These little guys use chlorophyll to eat up sunlight and, through photosynthesis, make up about half of the oxygen people need on our planet. Now, finally, let's talk about the deepest blue found in our planet's waters. Due to its location in the middle of a massive oceanic whirl, the water off the shore of Easter Island in the Southeast Pacific Ocean is deep and extraordinarily transparent. Here, the ocean's layers barely mingle, and nutrients aren't forced up from the deep bottom, leaving the water remarkably clear. For the human eye, it looks like it's indigo-colored. So if you ever find yourself in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, make sure to take a peek. Now, consider this. Could there be any other body of water underneath the ocean? How could that possibly be? It turns out that there's an underwater river making its way near the Australian shores. This undersea phenomenon is made up of sheets of dense water that find their way beside the ocean floor at a leisurely pace of about half a mile a day. That may not sound like much, but get this. It's a whopping 65 feet thick and goes for over 60 miles. Can you imagine riding down that river in a submarine or scuba diving next to it? Talk about a wild adventure. The findings of researchers who first identified this phenomenon were astounding. This is the first time that these dense shelf water cascades have been observed in such warm water, despite the fact that they are apparently more popular in high-latitude regions. According to Australian scientists, these rivers pop up because water evaporates during the summer, and then it's cooled in the wintertime. Who would have thought that the cyclical nature of the seasons could produce something so amazing? It's not the only place in the world where these events happen. Researchers have discovered underwater rivers in different countries all over our planet. For example, they found a similar one in the Black Sea, one off the coast of Portugal, and even one in Mexico. But back to the Australian River, because that's where the real excitement is. The researchers used seafaring gliders to uncover this amazing discovery. These self-propelling robots come with special sensors that check the water temperature, salt quantity, plankton productivity, and oxygen levels. They can also make popcorn. Nah, just kidding. They can work underwater without pause for up to 8 months, which is way longer than most humans can stay underwater. And let me tell you, these gliders did not disappoint. Thanks to them, we now know about this incredible underwater river in Australia. The majority of our ocean is still a mystery to us. That's both good and bad news, right? Well, on the bright side, there's much to be excited about in the future. Sure, exploring the universe sounds good, but there's still much to do here. So why not start with the deep blue sea? As for the information scientists don't yet know, don't worry, they're not just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. Through some good old-fashioned exploring, we're learning more and more about the secrets of the sea. As of 2021, we've only mapped about 20% of the seafloor using high-tech sonar systems mounted on ships. Now that's a lot, but when you consider that the U.S. seafloor alone is bigger than all 50 states put together, you can see there's still a long way to go. And let's not forget about all the amazing creatures down there. Scientists think there could be up to 1 million different species in the ocean, with the majority still waiting to be discovered.
The Empire State Building's tower was designed to serve as a docking station for dirigibles. At that time, people believed that these airships would become the main means of transportation in the future. The project included gangplanks, check-in and customs offices, and so on. But then the engineers realized that the wind up there was too strong for their plans, and they gave up on their idea. Angel Falls, the largest uninterrupted waterfall on the planet, is more than twice as tall as the Empire State Building. During the dry season, the falling water sometimes evaporates before it reaches the ground. One of the most mysterious sounds ever heard on Earth was the bloop. It occurred in 1997 and resembled the noise of marine animals, but the volume was too great for a sound produced by a living creature. The bloop continued for 1 minute. It started from a low rumble and then rose in frequency. Antarctica might just look like a giant field of ice, but there's actually a huge continent underneath. That means that it has volcanoes, mountains, and valleys, like any other continent. Scientists have recently discovered that the Antarctic landmass has the lowest point on the planet, as well as huge mountain ranges. If any of the numerous volcanoes were to erupt, it would melt a huge part of the surface ice and increase the spill of ice into the ocean. The sea level would rise and flood coastal areas around the world. The ocean waters would also be disrupted, putting marine life at risk, though all of these volcanoes are dormant at the moment. Each day on the South Pole lasts 6 months on this continent. The South Pole only has a single sunset and sunrise across an entire year. early Earth might have been purple, not green. There's a theory that ancient microbes used molecules rather than chlorophyll to absorb sunlight. These molecules likely gave living organisms a violet tint. During the Stone Age, the entire population of Central Europe was around 1,500 people, which means they would all fit on a mid-sized cruise liner these days. Astronomers have figured out that the Milky Way weighs around 1.5 trillion solar masses, and one solar mass is the mass of our Sun. A tiny part of this weight is a supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy, and 200 billion stars. The rest is dark matter, mysterious and invisible. If all sheets of Arctic ice and glaciers melted at the same time, the sea level would rise for the height of a 26-story building. Under black or UV light, ripening bananas look bright blue. That's because of the chlorophyll that's breaking down when the fruit is ripening. Because of tectonic plate movements, the Pacific Ocean shrinks every year, and the Atlantic Ocean gets bigger by the same amount. These days, there are only 2 ice sheets in the world left after the planet's last ice age. The first is the Greenland ice sheet. The second, the Antarctic ice sheet, is enormous. It's the size of Mexico and the continental US combined. Tsunami waves often go unnoticed. They don't rise for more than several inches above the surface until they reach shallow waters. When the ocean is deep, though, they can travel as fast as a long-distance passenger airplane. Corals that live in shallow waters produce their own protection from the sun. Without it, sunlight would harm the algae living inside them. To protect these algae, which are the main source of food for the corals, they fluoresce. This process makes proteins that act as sunscreen. Almost 90% of the volcanic activity on Earth happens in the oceans. The South Pacific has the largest concentration of volcanoes people know about. There's one volcano cluster that has 1,133 volcanic cones. All of them are active and cooped up in an area the size of New York State. The Zemchug Canyon in the middle of the Bering Sea is the largest underwater canyon ever discovered. There are more treasures and artifacts at the bottom of the ocean than in all museums in the world combined. In 1900, one of the biggest hurricanes struck near Central America and in the Gulf of Mexico. It then went as far as Florida and Texas and is considered to be the most devastating hurricane in the United States history. They first detected it on August 27th, and it lasted for many days. By the time it reached the Texas coast, the storm had turned into a Category 4 hurricane. Hurricanes are categorized on wind speed and intensity using something called a Saffir-Simpson scale. There are 5 different categories from 1 to 5, with 1 being the weakest and 5 being the strongest. The people of Galveston had less than 4 days to prepare for the arriving storm that even stretched out to Oklahoma and Kansas. The Great Hurricane then made its way to the Great Plains and turned towards the Great Lakes, New England, and reached southeastern Canada. The storm was so bad that more than 3,600 homes were damaged, even though they were sturdy enough to withstand the storm. Given the population numbers back then, it was equivalent to hundreds of thousands of houses destroyed, if not millions. Spotted Lake, Canada. They call it the most magical spot in Canada. In winter and spring, this is just a regular lake that looks like any other, but try going there in the summer when the water starts to evaporate. It'll feel as if you've entered a different world, a polka-dotted landscape with blue, green, and yellow spots. Over the summer, there are over 300 pools there, and they all look magical. Over the centuries, people believed each of them had different healing properties. Oh, and the explanation for the vibrant colors is pure science. Each of them has a high concentration of different minerals. We live inside the sun. Its atmosphere stretches far beyond its visible surface, and even though Earth is 93 million miles away from the star, it's still within reach of the sun's atmosphere. Auroras happen when charged particles from the sun get caught by Earth's magnetic field and crash into the upper atmosphere near the poles. Our planet is gradually slowing down the speed of its rotation. It happens at an unhurried pace of 17 milliseconds per 100 years. Because of this, our days are becoming longer, and still, only after 140 million years, A day on Earth will last 25 hours. Earth's southernmost continent, Antarctica, is only the fifth largest one, but it contains almost 70% of the planet's fresh water and 90% of the world's ice. Antarctica is also considered to be a desert. Lots of rocks on Earth have a Martian origin. Scientists analyze the chemical content of some meteorites found in the Sahara Desert, Antarctica, and other places. It turned out that these rocks had arrived from the Red Planet. The largest sandcastle in the world is located in Denmark. 30 sand sculptors who created it used more than 5,000 tons of sand. To make it more durable, they added 10% of clay, together with a layer of glue. They built it to stand tall against long and stormy winters. Some photons that don't get absorbed are re-emitted, and their wavelength determines the color we see. When you expose a material to sunlight or photons of higher energy, it can damage its chromophores, which is why they won't be able to emit photons at certain wavelengths. Red materials fade in sunlight the most. Their chromophores emit red light in a way they mop up photons of the rest of the wavelengths. From 60 to 100 tons of space dust drift down to our planet's surface every day. These tiny cosmic particles are mostly released by comets, which are usually made of dust and ice. When the sun turns this ice into vapor, the remaining dust travels down to Earth.
My, it's wet out here. In 2016, scientists decided to study the widest part of the Atlantic Ocean between Africa and South America. It's kind of lonely there. They went days without seeing a single plane or ship. It was mostly just dolphins and whales swimming by. They were in the middle of nowhere. So why? They were floating right above one of the most important geological spots on Earth, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It's where two monster tectonic plates meet. Tectonic plates are massive jigsaw pieces that are constantly moving, even though we usually can't feel them. They form the Earth's crust and, in this case, meet beneath the Atlantic Ocean. The researchers floated over the ridge and dropped down some instruments that detect waves, earthquakes, and other vibrations. A year later, they came back to collect the results. At first, the goal was to learn more about the history of the two plates. But the instruments picked up a whole lot more than that. They found out some stuff about the future, too. Way down at the bottom, there's a layer of extremely hot liquid rock that's constantly rising up, pushing on the tectonic plates and causing them to move apart from each other. That means that the Atlantic Ocean is expanding about 2 inches every year, pushing Europe and Africa away from the Americas. At the same time, its bigger neighbor, the Pacific Ocean, is shrinking. It's the biggest ocean, right now, with a huge area that's around 30% of the Earth's surface. Its average depth is 13,000 feet and is home to the famous Mariana Trench, the deepest spot in any ocean. And yeah, it's now shrinking by around 1/5 of a square mile per year. Some scientists even believe that eventually, millions and millions of years from now, the Pacific Ocean could completely disappear. This ocean is where we think most earthquakes happen, plus it's where a lot of the world's volcanoes are. All that causes lots of shaking. Plates move around and old parts of the Earth's crust get destroyed. The ocean floor can't grow fast enough to replace it. This means some big changes are coming in the future. A couple of inches isn't exactly a big deal, but after a few 100 million years, there'll probably be a new supercontinent on Earth. Australia is slowly heading north, and it could eventually collide with Korea, Japan, and eastern China. Africa is moving too. In 50 million years, it'll be pushing right up against the southern parts of Europe. Since it's all happening so slowly, I've had a chance to think up some future scenarios. Okay, not me. A bunch of super brainy scientists with even brainier computers. The first scenario, a monster landmass called Novo. The Americas would slam into Antarctica, then they'd team up and head over to Africa. Meanwhile, Africa would have already smashed into Europe and Asia. Not bad, at least you'd save some money on plane tickets. But for most people, it would take an epic road trip to get to a beach somewhere. The second scenario is Ultima. I feel like these all sound like car names. Anyway, in this scenario, the Atlantic stops getting wider. Actually, it's the opposite. It starts closing in on itself. This new super cool continent would be surrounded by the Pacific Ocean. Scenario 3. Orica. Both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans eventually shrink down until they either disappear or end up like tiny little lakes. All the life in these two oceans is gone. Instead, some new ocean starts forming to replace them. And the new supercontinent? It has Australia in the corner, with the Americas and East Asia each on the opposite side of a small puddle that used to be the Pacific. The rest of the planet is one big unexplored superocean inhabited by… who knows? I won't be around then. Number 4. Amasia. There's that car thing again. This one predicts Africa, Australia, and all the continents except Antarctica start moving north. Sorry, Antarctica, even planet Earth keeps forgetting about you. Better luck next time. Well, way off in the future, it might be possible to take a big old road trip across every continent, or drive across the African-South American border, or even get to Australia without having to take the longest flight of your life. But we've got a while to wait. What should I do for the next 250 million years? Binge watch some Brightside? Tectonic plates move at different speeds, some slower, some slightly faster. Your hair and fingernails actually grow at roughly the same speed as these beasts move. Imagine if everyone lived on one of those supercontinents. Animals would finally be able to cross continents and meet species they've never seen before. Leopards, rhinos, lions, elephants. Imagine if they got curious enough to set out on a journey out of their habitat. A lion might meet a polar bear. Kangaroos could finally leave the land down under, and birds that migrate to warmer places would have to totally reorganize their travel schedules. Who knows what the climate would be like? Playing around with the continental jigsaw puzzle isn't exactly a new thing. Our world didn't always look like this. 300 million years ago, our planet didn't have 7 continents. It had only one, a supercontinent called Pangaea. Pangaea was surrounded by only one ocean. Over time, it slowly started falling apart. At one point, South America, Antarctica, Australia, and Africa were one unit, and North America and Eurasia were another. Over time, these continents also splintered off, each heading in its own direction. Scientists have discovered many similar plants and animal fossils on continents that are separated by huge oceans. Even when you just glance at a map, you can see how Africa and South America look like two massive puzzle pieces that fit together perfectly. When you look at all the oceans and seas on a map, it may look like they just flow right into each other, like there's only one big ocean and people gave different names to different parts. You wouldn't think that if you've ever been to the place where they meet. The Atlantic and Pacific have a strict border that looks like an invisible wall separating two completely different worlds. You can clearly see different colors and waters, and they don't mix. Of course, there's no wall or any actual physical border, but not all water's the same. The Pacific and Atlantic have different densities, amounts of salt, temperatures, and a whole bunch of differences. The borders that separate two bodies of water are called ocean clines. The line you see dividing the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean is mostly caused by different salt levels. This is what layers of water with different salt levels look like. It's like they're separated with cling film, each one with a different color because it has different things growing in it. To see a clear, noticeable border, one sea or ocean has to be a whole lot saltier than the other. Want to get active and use up all the salt in your house? Pour some colored salty water or seawater into a glass bowl. Then add fresh water on top. Voila! The Pacific Ocean is the less salty one. That's because there are loads more rivers flowing into it. Heavier liquids are heavy, so they should sink to the bottom. But then, why is the border between the Atlantic and Pacific a vertical line and not a horizontal one? First, the difference in density of these two salty beasts may be enough to stop them from mixing, but it's not really enough to send one of them to the bottom with the other floating above it. There's another reason, and it's all about the Earth spinning around. Say you're flying from Chile to New England. If you fly straight north, by the time you get there, the Earth will have turned a bit, and you'd be nowhere near your destination. To get to the right place, the pilot needs to fly in a bit of a curve. That's sort of the same reason that currents move around in different directions. The currents in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans move away from each other, so they don't really mix at their border, even though they're both just water. Confused? Yeah, me too.
Miami's luxury towers have everything. Car elevators, rooftop pools, celebrity neighborhoods, and something completely unexpected called gradual descent. A new study shows dozens of beachfront high-rises are slowly sinking into the ground. Just a couple of inches over a few years and still moving. What's going on? And is it gonna get worse? Let's find out. When you look at a map of South Florida, the city of Miami is mostly on the mainland. Just off the coast lies a long barrier island. That's Miami Beach, the stretch you see in most drone shots and travel clips. Fancy cars, the beach, the clubs, the glass towers right next to the water, that's all on this island. But it didn't always look like that. For a long time, this area was mostly older hotels and simple apartment buildings. As prices went up and richer buyers started chasing ocean views, developers began knocking those down and putting luxury high-rises in their place. Floor by floor, that island turned into a narrow wall of glass facing the Atlantic Ocean. Now, here's the problem. Miami Beach sits only 4 to 5 feet above sea level. That's barely enough height for comfort. Each fall, king tides push water up through drains and across certain streets on bright, clear days. The flooding sometimes gets so bad that locals could kayak through parking lots for fun. That might sound like a funny video, but for researchers, it raised a serious question. Could the same landscape be shifting beneath the towers too? Some buildings had already shown signs of movement, and the question became whether the ground itself was still settling under all that concrete and steel. To find out, scientists used a method called INSAR, which stands for Interferometric Synthetic Aperture Radar. It works by having satellites scan the same spot on Earth over and over using radar to detect tiny changes in elevation. It's like watching a tower in slow motion from space, tracking whether it holds steady or slowly sinks. Those scans stack hundreds of satellite passes over the same balcony corners and roof edges. It's the same kind of radar NASA uses to track volcanoes and ground shifts. With enough images, researchers can spot motion as small as the thickness of a credit card. Between 2016 and 2023, they focused on this section of coastline from Sunny Isles to Miami Beach. The data showed that at least 35 high-rise buildings had moved downward over that period. In some cases, the ground had dropped just under an inch. In others, it was closer to 3. That may not seem like much, but over a short time, and in structures this heavy, it means something's off. These weren't new buildings under construction. Most were already finished, which makes the continued movement unusual. In theory, they should have settled and stopped, but they didn't. So what exactly is making the ground sink under these towers? Let's look underground, specifically right under these nice-looking buildings. Beneath the island is a mix of sand and Miami limestone. It is strong enough to build on, but it behaves more like hardened coral than solid mountain rock. Water moves through it, pressure moves through it, and sometimes the ground shifts in ways engineers can't properly predict. One possible explanation is something called creep deformation. It sounds like a villain from a B-movie, but it's actually a slow-motion rearranging of particles under constant pressure. Imagine parking a heavy truck on soft ground. It makes little dents right away, but if the truck stays there for a long time, those dents slowly get deeper. The ground keeps squishing a tiny bit at a time. That slow squishing is what might be happening under these buildings. But it's not just the weight. Construction itself can wake the ground up. Pile drivers, excavation, and heavy machinery can shake the sandy layers enough that older buildings nearby start shifting again. The study also found that some of the newer towers showed stronger movement overall, likely because the soil beneath them was still adjusting after recent construction. And then there's the water. The limestone underneath acts like a sponge, soaking up water from the ocean below and the rain above. When that water moves around, it quietly eats away at the rock and shifts the sand that holds everything up. That's how the ground slowly loosens. So, we have a spongy ground, heavy buildings, and the constant shaking from construction. Plus, water flowing through the rock. Over time, all of that adds up. It presses down just a little at first, then a little more. We're only talking inches, but even small uneven shifts can be enough to make engineers nervous. So, what does this mean for the buildings and all the people making social media reels? Probably, and hopefully, nothing. At least not tomorrow. We're still far away from disaster movie scenarios. Structures won't topple over. There won't be sudden sinkholes swallowing cars. It's not how it works. But this problem does raise some eyebrows, especially after what happened just a few miles north in Surfside. In 2021, the Champlain Towers South partially collapsed. It was a huge tragedy that Miami will remember forever. That disaster didn't happen just because the ground moved. Issues kept piling up slowly over the years. Engineers discovered cracks, rust, and bad drainage. The building was falling apart from all sides, and then it was too late to do anything about it. But since then, the city has been paying more attention. Engineers are reassessing older buildings near the coast, and local officials are pushing for stricter inspections. The radar data doesn't mean a building is unsafe, but it can be an early warning. A signal that something deserves a closer look. For residents, though, there's a catch. Right now, there's no rule that says developers or building managers have to monitor ground movement with satellite scans. The study didn't involve teams going inside or taking core samples. It was just a space-based scan from above. If you zoom out from the sinking tower drama and look at that long strip of land, it's already one of the weirdest pieces of real estate on the planet. A good portion of the Miami lifestyle is literally fake land. Star Island, Palm, Hibiscus, the Venetian chain, and a bunch of other spots started as sand at the bottom of Biscayne Bay. The bay was dredged in the 1920s. The sand was piled into islands, and developers turned those piles into celebrity neighborhoods where houses now cost tens of millions of dollars. Some of the richest people on Earth treat this area like their private game board. Fisher Island, just off South Beach, currently has the most expensive zip code in the United States, with a median listing price in the 8-figure range. A bit farther up sits Indian Creek, known as the Billionaire Bunker. It has only 41 houses, its own police force, and neighbors like Jeff Bezos and Tom Brady. One empty 1.8-acre lot there was recently listed for around $200 million, just for the dirt and the view. And all of this floats along the edge of Biscayne Bay, next to an actual national park full of beautiful marine creatures like dolphins, manatees, and sea turtles. More than 100 bottlenose dolphins live in and around the bay year-round, racing past boat docks and tall condos, like they're extras in someone else's movie. So, what happens next? Engineers keep scanning, inspectors keep checking, and everyone online keeps posting drone shots like nothing odd is happening under their feet. That's Miami, a strange blend of glamour and physics that never quite behaves. It's not a crisis, it's a maintenance routine. As long as the people in charge pay attention to quieter signals like slow dips in elevation or small structural changes, the skyline should hold. Maybe it settles a bit, maybe it stretches and groans. Now that engineers and scientists are aware of this issue, they can prepare and propose solutions. Until then, the towers will still be up and the bay will still shine bright. The whole city will keep drifting in its own style, just slightly downward.